Well, welcome to this edition of Actually Olympia, the podcast. This is episode 10. Believe it or not, we're 10 episodes into our podcast, and I'm your host, Jay Burney, and I'd like to start by introducing my co-host, who this is her second episode, just starting right in, Stacey. So introduce yourself, Stacey.
I'm Stacey Ray, Assistant City Manager, and glad to be back and co-hosting.
Well, welcome. And I'm really excited for our guest today. Well, you know, this is an episode that's a mixture of sadness for me and excitement at the same time because we're wishing goodbye and saying goodbye to a longtime Councilmember, Jim Cooper. So I want to welcome Councilmember Jim Cooper to the podcast. But I'm also just excited, Jim, to celebrate you here today on the podcast and just talk about your career as a council person and all the amazing things you've done. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Jay and Stacey. I'm excited for this conversation. It's been a long ride. So
It has been a long ride. What, 15 years?
Yes,
15 years. And as I'll talk about in a minute, you know, I've been on that ride with you the entire time. It's been a great run serving alongside you. So one of the things I do with all of my guests is talk about their origin story because I like to think those in public service are superheroes, and all superheroes have an origin story. So tell us a little bit about how you got into government, how you got into public service, how you got into this amazing job of being a council person for the city of Olympia.
Yeah, for sure. That's I love the superhero analogy. It's a good one. I was thinking about it a little bit last night, and my origin story is that public service is in my blood. As far back as my great-grandfather, I can track elected officials. My great-grandfather was a constable in Texas who actually sold gasoline to Bonnie and Clyde, so that's another story for another day. But my great-grandmother was a precinct committee officer and active in the Democratic Party. My grandfather was a school board member and the fire chief of the town I grew up in Edmonds, Washington. My dad was a firefighter and the mayor and a legislator and a county council member and is now on the Elma City Council in his retirement. So public service wasn't an option, but I really tried hard in my young years to avoid it and get away from it as far as I could, to be honest. And George Bush Jr. got me motivated. So the president of the United States was doing a lot of anti-environment kind of stuff. And so it got me kind of agitated, and I started getting involved. So I got involved with the Democratic Party, and then later I was a delegate for Barack Obama to be president at the Democratic National Convention, and he told all of us on the floor of the Mile High Stadium that we needed to go and run for office so that we would make our communities as good as we wanted the country to be, and I took that seriously and went and did it.
That's a great story, Jim. In fact, both long line of family, and I love the Barack Obama inspiration. That was probably an awesome experience in and of itself.
It was amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, another story for another day, right?
Well, Jim, I just want to also express my gratitude for being able to sit down and talk with you too. You've been influential in my career here. We've overlapped for the 15 years that you've been in office as well. And so I'm just hoping to ask you a little bit to reflect on your 15 years and just share with us when you look back, you know, what are some things that you're most proud of? What are some accomplishments that you'd want to highlight for us? And any significant policy decisions that have been really meaningful for you?
Oh my goodness, we have all week, right? So I can
yeah, all the time in the world.
Yeah, right. It's been a lot. I mean, so technically, I was elected in December of 2011. 3 weeks before my daughter was born, I was sworn in, and a lot of people think I was appointed because I had a midterm. So I want to clarify that for Emmett and his podcast. But really, over almost 15 years, there are a lot of things we've done. The city has changed immensely. We have, started a metropolitan parks district, which made us the best funded parks and recreation program in the state, one of the better in the country. I really value our tribal partnerships. So the work we've done with both Nisqually and Squaxin. I had the opportunity to help start the Regional Housing Council, sensing a theme of starting things as I've been thinking about the reflection. I didn't really know that I was doing that as it was happening, but when I look back, I get in the middle of things when they start up. Mostly because I'm an activist at heart, and I see an opportunity, and I get people together, and we figure it out. So the Regional Housing Council, or even some of the things that we failed at, like the Regional Fire Authority, were really good conversations for the community to have a better understanding of the complication of funding government services when we have specific funding for some things and no funding for other things. And I'm sure you'll sense a finance theme as we have this conversation as well. So.
Well, it just kind of takes me to my next question. You've spent a large part of your time on council on the finance committee, a long time as chair of the finance committee. That's been challenging work. You've navigated 2 city managers in that work, former city manager Steve Hall, and then have been really instrumental in my time as city manager, working with me as well. And talk about some of the challenges and why that work is so important and was so important to you.
Yeah, 2 city managers and maybe 8 financial directors at the city in my time. And so a lot of turnover, which means a lot of everybody catching up and making sure they're on the same page. I talked about this a little bit at our last finance meeting of the year, but we really have seen the city move largely through our financial work from a really political organization when it set goals as a city council to a city council that has become more data-driven and more outcomes-based. Yeah. And I think that's largely because of the financial shortages. We've had to be a lot more efficient. We've had to make sure we talk to more people about, what we're doing in the finance space and continue to reinvent that sort of public process for how we have a conversation. And we, when I came onto the council, we had before me what was known as the brick and mortar city council. That's the rumor around town, right? And they worked really hard and spent, helped guide $100 million investments and public investments in our downtown, from Percival Landing to the Hands-On Children's Museum to the Lot headquarters. And that was a great catalyst for when I came on, and it was Downtown Project 2, I think, if I'm remembering the right phasing of all of that. And we took that investment and turned it into economic development work and have actually made our community's economy more diverse. We're less dependent on the state because we started doing our own economic development work and working with companies and the workforce. And we have done a good job making sure that we're on top of the revenue situation of the city, because when you're focused on capital, you can't really focus as well on operating revenue. Yep. And so I think in the future, the thing to watch is how do we stabilize that pendulum so it doesn't swing so far from capital to revenue, and lose track of those capital conversations, which are so important in the long-term success of the city. If we don't keep growing into the needs of our community and taking care of what we have, we can't serve our community. And it comes down to those assets. The timing is really good for that. I just came from a push-in ceremony at the fire station, and we got a new Medic 1 unit. And, we're always improving and trying to stay ahead on our asset management so that our employees can do a really good job serving the community. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, I think and you've said this to me a lot, it's something I've really learned a lot from you, is to keep as much focus on the capital as the operating. I mean, the operating gets a lot of scrutiny, and it's easy to lose sight of how important our capital expenditures are and how important the planning of our capital expenditures are, right? And the other thing, Jim, that you've worked really hard and with all of us is trying to get to a more sustainable place in our budget, right? That's probably been the hardest work over these last 5 years in particular, but probably the entire time you've been on the council, we've been working on budget and having tough years and trying to get through them and get to a place where we're on much better ground.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I think that I've been a part of 5 revenue ballot measures, and 4 of them passed, and we have generated, and along with some councilmatic decisions, over $20 million of ongoing revenue for the city, both for general operating and for some really specific demands of the community.
Yeah. Well, switching topics a bit, and you mentioned Regional Housing Council, and you've been a champion of the work to regionalize our efforts to address homelessness throughout the county. Talk about why that's important in the overall approach to addressing homelessness. Hardly
anyone knows where the political boundaries are between the cities, even if unless they're really involved in government stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like they might not know if they're in the city or in the urban growth area, or whether they're, even if they have an Olympia address on their envelopes, they live in Hawks Prairie and unincorporated Lacey, if you will. And so if there's so much migration and economics that goes across the lines. It's the same thing with people. And so when we started learning who our homeless population was, they were, largely people who had been in Thurston County for a long, long time, but they might have been from different parts of Thurston County, depending on where the services were or where their story led them. At that time, we were in a less than ideal relationship situation with the county.
Yeah.
And so the impetus for starting the Regional Housing Council was actually the three biggest cities, Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, and a few council members coming together and saying, well, the county commission took us out of the process. We have a little bit of money of our own, but the majority of the money is going into this bigger pot countywide. And if we don't have an influence on the outcome with those funds, then we might not want to play.
Right.
And so we all got together and we started talking and like learning more and working with our staff. And we realized very quickly that we need the county. And even if we're in a bad relationship, we have to work to help people together, particularly in the housing space. And, any of the human services and public health work that we do, we really need to try to approach it regionally. And so luckily, John Hutchings and I managed to come together in that space. And so he was willing to be the first rep from the county commission to the new entity that we were trying to create.
That's right.
And then at the same time, the city of Olympia went out to the voters and asked to create the home fund. And then maybe 3 years after that, the legislature had given the authority to the county commission to create a home fund without going to the voters. So Olympia always does the hard way, and then the legislature makes it easy for the rest of the cities and the counties in the state. But so then the county started a home fund, and all of a sudden, we have more than $7 million a year that we're able to give out. And
Incredible.
You can't do that when it's not regional.
That's right.
And I think the long-term vision that we had then was, how do we create a lot type of organization, like the Clean Water Alliance, that's for health and human services? And how can we spin it away from any one of our governments so it's controlled and provides some cover for local government that might not be having that skill set or having the staff expertise in those spaces to be able to partner and be involved in the work without having to hire all the staff and everything. And I still look forward to that. I think that it's still a necessary component. Mm-hmm. And if we spin off, then we would have the opportunity to bring in more private dollars into this conversation that right now we don't really have a nonprofit that's helping us raise the philanthropic money for our housing and homelessness problem in a bigger way. Our local nonprofits are awesome, but they're all working to fund their own mission, right?
Yep.
And we need a way to sew that up.
Yeah. There was a time when if we felt very alone in Olympia on our work on homelessness. And I'm so grateful and thankful to the other cities in the county for coming together in the way that we have. I think we've made so much more progress together than any one of us could have made by ourselves. So just, as you said, it's hard to come up with $7 million on your own, but together we got there.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of work to go, but we've made a huge amount of progress. I think our downtown's in a better place than it's been in 30 years. And, we're down to one significant encampment. Well, significant, that was from a dozen 2 years ago. And so we've made huge progress, and we would not have been able to do it alone.
Yeah, and housed hundreds along the way.
House thousands, I think.
Yeah.
If we really think about the permanent supportive housing units and the big Lansdale Point affordable housing that we all partnered to make the match on that's being built on near I-5. It's a lot of units.
It's a lot of units.
More to come.
It's good work.
Well, Jim, you've been really involved in homelessness and the housing work efforts that we've been a part of. You've also been really engaged in the work we've done around social justice and equity, particularly since 2020. And I think you've always done a tremendous job of bringing both your professional, your day job expertise in lifting up community members that might be living in poverty, and kind of your interest in being data-driven and really addressing some of those issues and bringing that to the conversation around equity. So can you just talk to us a little bit about kind of how you feel you've been an advocate in that arena, and maybe the accomplishments and what you're proud of.
I think for me as an elected official, the main reason is to be here for people without a voice. Like the people with privilege in our community have no trouble accessing government. They have no trouble being loud and taking over a city council meeting if they want to. But there's a lot of people that don't have access to that, whether it's because of their means or their work schedule or whatever that might be. And so that's why I feel I'm here. And so early on in the work, we had meetings with our trans community around Trans Day of Remembrance. We had, use of force issues with police department that caused the city council to create a subcommittee all the way back to 2015, and looking at use of force and policing in the community. At that time, we looked at body cameras. Yep. We looked at a lot of things, and I think that was really the core beginning of the equity work for the city of Olympia. Mm-hmm. And in fact, in 2020, when so many people were coming out of the woodwork after George Floyd's murder to tell us, you never do anything, the thing that was the hardest was not to respond with but yes, we have, and the laundry list of things that we've done great. Mm-hmm. And I think we've learned that lesson as city is no matter what, that's not the response. Right? You have to let your work speak for itself. And when the community comes at you and makes demands, you stop, you listen, and you see where you can accommodate those demands in your work. And so from those early conversations, it's really become much more core. Like coming out of that committee, I think you started the equity committee
on diversity and equity.
Committee on diversity and equity at the city. The white city manager was leading that, and seen as the leader in that space, which I think is an important thing to remember. Like the more we talk about equity and the more we try to make things more accessible for everyone, it's the white people that are responsible for driving that conversation because we're responsible for the outcomes that we have. And, so to have Jay be that leader in the city made it easy for me to see opportunities to take leadership in that space and to say we can't just rely on our friends of color every single time to help us.
Yep.
Just because they're of color doesn't mean that they have the solution, nor should we expect them to. In fact, they should be given a pass when they want to, because it's a lot harder conversation for them than it is for me, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's been a real joy. I was trying to think like maybe 2017 or 2018 is when Renata Rollins and I proposed having a human rights commission.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that spun out into the Social Justice and Equity Commission. Mm-hmm. And really, I believe the conversion of the General Government Committee to the Community Livability and Public Safety Committee. So there's still work to do, but we've gone miles. And I think, now we're at a point where we're seen as a leader in this space, and we're getting to places where we can actually make more deliberate change because we've gone through the learning. We know more about the position we're sitting in and what needs to change so that we can actually make real meaningful change.
Yeah, I think, a big piece of that too is, and Stacey, you can speak to this, right, is we've changed how we engage, right? And this is no longer, and you actually said it, Jim, too, you said this could be hard for folks who aren't used to and don't have privilege, don't have power to come into the space and bring their voice. So sometimes you got to go to where they are and include them in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also appreciate that you talk about always being in learning, right? Because that's been key, is to accept that we don't know, we don't have all the perspectives, and we need to go out and be constantly learning, constantly curious, constantly finding out what's important to people and what their needs are.
Yeah, you have to know where you are on your own equity journey before you can talk about bringing equity to anyone else.
Right.
And
right.
I think that was probably the hardest thing for me, like coming into this. Like, I think I was in the whitewashing phase myself. So, I don't see color. I don't, everyone's the same to me. And that's like, I think we automatically put our brain, and it's counterintuitive to think that the real beauty is in all of our differences, and that's how we are able to be a community and be a society together. If we were all the same, it would be an abject failure.
Right. Well, related to this conversation is something I know you're also really proud of, is our work with the Squaxin Island tribe. That relationship, particularly over the last 10, 15 years, has strengthened. We have an accord together. We have an amazing partnership. So talk about that and how important that was during your time on council.
I think maybe the month before I was sworn in is when the first accord with the Squaxin tribe was signed. Mayor Ma
Yep.
negotiated that. And we didn't really do a lot, really, in that first accord. Like we had the meetings about once a quarter, and we built relationship, which I think is what got us to a point now where we're able to do a lot more. So we spent a lot of time on relations, breaking bread, and finding the places that the native culture and our culture could get together and understand each other better, which is a really important foundation, right? And then the first meaningful tribal partnership that we had was the transfer of the McAllister Springs well field to the Nisqually tribe, which I'm looking at a picture of that well house on the wall across from me. And it's by far, in my life, the most beautiful piece of public property there ever was.
Yep.
And to be able to churn the headwaters of the historic Medicine Creek back over to the natives who fished there thousands of years before white people ever came. I mean, it's really hard to even talk about without getting a tear in my eye. It's so special. And when you kind of jump forward in that relationship, we got more deliberate working with Squaxin. And I want to give a shout out largely because of Rich Hoy.
Yeah.
Right. So we had Rich, who was our public works director and an assistant city manager, but this guy knows how to build relationship with everyone.
Yep.
And he does it better than anyone I've ever met in my life.
Yep.
And the reason we have these strong relationships are because he laid that foundation for the city. And so when we, did the well field, it was awesome. And then we came together and we signed a new accord with the Squaxin in front of City Hall. And we raised the Squaxin flag over City Hall permanently. So we were one of the first local governments to recognize our tribal partnership and like that, and to really put the flag up over the place that they camped, that they lived. Well, this would have been below the shoreline then where we're sitting today, but they used this shoreline long before we did, and actually when it was pristine, it generated their livelihood, right? And so that was really special. And then kind of the icing on the cake was the next thing when we changed the name of Squaxin Park to recognize that was such a special place to the tribe for time immemorial. And even though it had some more recent local history, that was all people knew about.
Yep.
It was really important to the community and really special. It takes a minute to reprogram your brain when something has a different name, as I've also found in my gender journey, right? Like when something changes, you have to reprogram yourself.
That's right.
And so it took a minute, but it's really caught on. And now we have great signage and an annual event where we come together and recognize that partnership. And I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Yeah, the day we raised the flag was one of my proudest moments
Yeah.
as city manager.
For sure.
Right. And I think for the council, a really awesome moment. And for the tribe, a really awesome moment. And I still talk about it to this day.
Definitely.
You have been a champion of affordability in this community, and you've been vocal about your concerns about those living on the margins in our community. And so talk about your passion here, and what does the road ahead and the challenge you see for the council to come?
Yeah. This is a hard one, especially because we just came off of a pretty tough community conversation on ballot measure. But back to my earlier comment about the duty in this position is representing people that don't have a voice, right? And that most often tends to be lower income people that have to do more to get by than we do, right? So they might have 3 jobs where I have 2. Excuse me. They're more often than not in a fight or flight mode versus in contribution mode, if you will. And ability to kind of have their head up and look forward and think proactively about things can be really difficult. And I've been there. I think most of us have been there. I mean, I grew up as Alice, and in households when we were growing up, the only thing you heard your parents fight about was money, right? And I think that is such a common dynamic in America today. And we're finally in a place where affordability is a national conversation, which I think is really good. And there is not a lot the city can do to control affordability. And so I do think that as the city moves forward and works in the Olympia Strong space, which I'm really proud of that work, and I hope it never came across that I wasn't as I was advocating for more and more and more. It's great work. It's also really individual centric. And so how, as a city, can we do things more at the population scale to impact the livelihood of our workers? So whether that's around wage or regulation, always leaning on the state where we can. I think that while I was sad that the initiative failed in November, I've already heard 2 legislators tell me they want to work on predictive scheduling work statewide this session, right? And so, sometimes a loss in Olympia can be a win for the state. And that happened the first time we talked about minimum wage in 2015, and we'll still have some positive outcome because of this conversation. But it's really important to remember how many people can't talk to us because of that, just that financial situation. And that's 48% of our community, which is almost exactly what the vote count was, right? And so you have the people who have more wherewithal saying it might not be the right policy for right now. We might agree with the idea and the thinking, but not this one. Yeah. And then the people who need just saying anything. I'm going to vote yes for anything, but we're 48% of the community struggling to get by, but we're only 48% of the community struggling to get by, so we don't get to make the decision.
Right.
Right. And it's higher than I think it's been ever maybe in Olympia. And so how can we work? And I think that one of the really most important conversations we've had in the last couple of months is what does food sustainability look like in Olympia?
Yep.
We have around 60,000 families, and or 60,000 people, and we need to figure out how to make sure we can provide basic needs at a minimum, right? Even if we're not talking about wage and workplace conditions, but how can we make sure that people can eat and make sure we're really heavily into the shelter space already. Yep. I actually think now if we had another, I was thinking back to January of my first year on council, I had a newborn baby and I went for 6 days with no electricity, and there was a snowstorm, and we didn't have the ability really to provide any cold weather shelter to the general population. Like we had systems in place for homeless people or houseless people, but we didn't have a system in place, and now kind of do.
Code Blue.
We have a Cold Blue plan, and we know where the places are and who has generators and who can keep people warm. And I think that's a really good exercise, kind of like COVID, and like how can we be ready to take care of everyone when the time is necessary? And I think that food conversation is a really sweet spot that I would be really excited to see the city spend more time.
And I think we're going to do just that next year on the council's work plan.
Yeah. If I can follow up on that for a minute, Jim, I think I think we all remember too when our population, the number of renters exceeded the number of homeowners. That was significant for us and really started a policy conversation around how to best support our renters in this community.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and that's like now cheaper than owning. Like there's not a lot of motivation to own. And so there's a lot of work we need to do in the home ownership space, because it might be cheaper in the moment to own, but you're not really building wealth, or to not own and rent, but you're not building wealth if you're renting. And
that's true.
And we need people to have wealth so that they can break that intergenerational cycle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you think about, my wife and I were just talking about this the other day, that we bought our first house in 2001, brand new, $199,000. Right, 2,100 square feet. You can't find that anywhere in Thurston County, right? So in just a matter of, 15 years, how dramatic it has become for first-time home buyers, right, to get there. And then you layer on top of that interest rates and mortgage rates and all of that. It's a tough time, and that is our work, right? Our work, as you said, is to continue to find more ways to build housing affordability and to build housing for people at all income levels.
So you've talked a bit about engaging with the community. You've talked about it in terms of our equity work, our housing, and our budget process. And you've prided yourself on really being a voice for those that haven't been as involved or can't be involved. So just talk to us a little bit about what that evolution has meant to you in terms of engaging our community, involving our community members.
Yeah. Well, I think the real story in that would be if Jay had a podcast and interviewed you about it, because you've been a leader in that space for our city. But for me, it was about, so when I came on and I got onto the finance committee maybe in my first or second year, and I met with other finance committee chairs that had been on the city council prior to me, because I saw this continual reinvention of how we do public input. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, why don't we have a recipe for this? And so I didn't think it was good the way we were doing it. And I came to realize that we have to be doing that, because every time we do it, it's stale by the time we do it.
Yeah.
And so we have to continually reinvent and try to get ahead of the conversation so we can get the input in timely way to make sure that we can make an impact, right? And so how often are we asking the community for input? At the time, I think, really great engagement on parks and around budget every year, and the comprehensive plan, the Imagine Olympia process was the first major rewrite of our comprehensive plan. It had kind of been sitting on a shelf for like 20 years and not really been implemented, a little bit. And that was a huge undertaking of but community engagement, right?
Yeah.
And we talked to more people probably than the city ever has. And the cool thing has been we learned from that, and we started building it into how we engage in every department.
Yep.
And I think council members during that were saying, well, we know how to do this in parks. Why don't we know how to do it as well in other departments? And so, what would it look like for the fire department to go out and engage the community and build a master plan, right? And some things that might not have been in our everyday skill set as a city. And then making sure that when we improved that process every time, we were trying to be representative, right?
Yeah.
And so that was when I think this was when Debbie Sullivan was the finance manager or the administrative services manager director for a minute, was making sure that we did focus groups and having focus groups that were not people coming to listen to council members talk at them,
Right.
but focus groups that were asking them to tell us their opinion and where they thought the city should go in different places of how we did our work. And I think a representative focus group, and then making the practice of doing our customer service survey every other year, no matter what, made it so that we could be much more in touch with the pulse of what the city needed. We hear about sort of the emerging trends in public comment at council pretty easily, right? But to kind of keep an eye on the big picture and all the moving parts, like how do people feel about drinking water versus solid waste versus police, it's really an important tool to be able to make sure that we have an understanding of people from all walks of life, right? So not just how they look, but how much money they have. Our Senator Bateman, she always drilled into us, well, there's not enough renters doing this study, right?
Yeah.
We have 50% renters, but only 5% renters filled it out because, people who own homes tend to be more affluent and have more time, and they do surveys and some of that kind of stuff. So it's been a journey, and I think as long as the city continues to reinvent, it will continue to improve.
Yeah.
So we've talked about all the really amazing work you have accomplished and your successes. But what have been, 1 to 2 significant challenges you have faced in your time on council?
I think it's really important for everyone to understand that everything about being an elected official is a significant challenge.
Yeah.
It's, somehow our elected officials get on some weird pedestal in our community, and they get thought of as or othered all the time, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's a normal person with a normal job and a family, and then trying to be on the board of a $250 million organization and keep it driving while also listening to people when they're angry. right? And that's a really tough dynamic that most people outside of like the executive leadership team don't ever have to deal with in their job.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of harder jobs out there, don't get me wrong, but I just want to kind of start with that opener, because when I think about the question, the first thing that comes to mind is how hard this job has gotten since 2020.
Yeah.
And since the pandemic and George Floyd's murder, and you now have people that are more flagrant about how they scrutinize government, and they do it in an unfriendly way sometimes, and they do it in a way that can be very personal, including showing up at your house. And you've had that experience. I've been lucky to not have that experience. I've sat on my porch and sent my family away on more than one day, though, waiting for that experience. And I'd really like to have the community here and realize and think about how hard that is for people to get things done when they feel threatened, because it makes it so we can't get what we need done, right? And so, there were times when we were coming together at the mayor's house on weekends after, really unfortunate events outside of Mayor Selby's house, right? And talking about crisis communication as a small government, and how do we do these things. So I think I just want to ask the community to try to remember that it's really hard. And when you need something from us and you are concerned or upset, just try to stop and put yourself in the other person's position for a second. I know it's impossible to do, and it's kind of what everybody tells people to do, and it's nearly impossible. But if we just think that way for a minute, it can help the conversation go better. And then for the council, I think it's really important for future elected officials to just think about how much more difficult it is when we aren't talking to each other, right? And so as elected officials, the most difficult part of this job is when you don't know what people are thinking, and you sit down and you have to make a decision, and you're like, but I thought we should do it this way, and everyone else is over here, right?
Yeah.
And that's a hard spot to be in. Now it happens, and it's part of the job, but just making sure that you're trying extra hard to spend time with your colleagues and understand where they're coming from on the issues. And when something's going to be a tough conversation, like we should be talking more, right? And talking to each other. It can be difficult because we have to make sure we don't make a quorum and don't make decisions and all of those kinds of things. But we can talk all day long about our opinion and not ask the other person for their vote and really get pretty far. And I think not that there have been horrible situations because of that, but it's just something that we've needed to constantly remind ourselves of, right? And so anyone in a leadership position, if you're not talking, and I see this actually in nonprofit boards all the time, like we're in this really weird spot. Well, how come none of you have talked to each other? You don't have the quorum public meeting rule. Excuse me. But if you aren't talking to people, you're not likely to have a good outcome. Yeah. And so there's a lot more complicated and difficult things that have happened over 15 years, but those are the two that come to mind.
Well, I think, too, it's important for community members to know how much time and effort and heart you put into this role. You wouldn't do it if you weren't willing to invest. I know, Jay and I get copied on we see all the email that comes in to all of you. You spend a lot of time trying to understand what community members want you to know, how they express their stories, their feelings, their wants, their needs with you. And I just think it's important for community members to know that you don't take that lightly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and one email with an upset community member or a concerned community member turns into a meeting, turns into 3 more meetings, turns into how do we fix this, turns into the policy process, right? And so things can add up really fast. And I think it's really good that you mentioned that. And depending on the gravity of the situation, you have to go quicker or you have more time, depending on what's going on. And it's it can easily shadow your family and your day job. And actually, the thing I've always told new elected officials is carve out your family time first, because that has to be the only non-negotiable, because otherwise you won't be able to hang.
That's right.
You won't get through the day if you don't say, I'm sorry, I don't do city stuff on Saturdays, maybe on Veterans Day, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. That the whole work-life balance portion of this is, I think, gets lost sometimes. And you put the hours in, but making sure you make the connections where you need to make them back at home, right? And you've done a really good job at that, Jim, over the years. I know there's nights you've missed some things along the way that are hard, but I've always admired your ability to make sure you know where home is, right?
Well, and I learned a lot of that from you and Steve Hall. Like, that's the mantra at the city, right? Family first, because that's how you get things out of people, right?
Yep.
Like, things get done when people are happy at home.
Yep, I agree 100%. Yeah. Your city manager's happier when he gets his work-life
Right.
balance too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good for all of us. So, well, Jim, we're kind of reaching the end point here, but we wanted to leave a little bit of time for you to, anything we didn't talk about, anything else on your mind that you'd like to talk about, or just like for the community to know about you as you head off into council member retirement. You're not retiring from your day job, but you're definitely hanging it up as an elected official for now. I'll say for now, because you don't know what the future holds. That's my little way of pinging you a little bit. But what's next?
No elected official jobs, I can tell you that, for the foreseeable future. Well, you talk about time. Like, I have a teenager who wants me to drive her everywhere now, and
Yeah.
it's really hard to juggle this role. So I think in the coming year, focusing on my family and my job is really important. I had a few ideas and a few people asking me, but my wife helped me have a rule of not taking anything on while I was still in this role.
Yep.
So all the ideas will change over the holidays once I have some time to think, and then we'll see where I go from there. I definitely know I'll be around. I'm still Thurston County Housing Authority Commissioner, so I'll be working in the housing space and actually having more time for that. I'm really excited about some of the work we have going. In fact, we're about to break ground on a cottage village for seniors and for families with kids across from Camachin Middle School in Lacey. It'll be called McClanahan Village, and naming it after Neil McClanahan, who was the longtime chair of the Housing Authority Board, but also the creator of the Thurston County Home Consortium, which was the predecessor to the Regional Housing Council. And so it's really cool to honor Neil's legacy in that work. And then I still have one city project that I really want to work hard on, and that's trying to memorialize the USS Olympia submarine in our city. So we have some pieces of the submarine. A lot of the community doesn't know that. We currently in storage have the rudder and the anchor from the submarine, and while the submarine is retired, it's sitting in the bay, cooling off after the nuclear fuel has been removed. And then there's a possibility we could get a big piece of the submarine.
Yeah.
And so working on a committee or helping to start a nonprofit or working with the Park Foundation to figure out what that looks like and where it'll go in our community is pretty exciting.
Well, I should say, Jim, we have those parts and pieces because of you.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
You've worked really hard to make sure that we got those parts and pieces, and you've stayed in contact to try to make sure we get other parts and pieces later.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because Chief Morris has the fire axe from the submarine. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so we'll see where that goes, and it's a cool one. And then I want to just say a big thank you to every single person that has worked for Olympia while I've been here. I tend to say it a lot, and I worry that people think I'm just being flip when I say we have a world-class staff, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Like, I've not ever seen an organization that's so dedicated to its constituency, that churns on a dime. I was talking to an employee the other day that said, I learned at Evergreen when you get to 500 employees, an organization takes on a mind of its own. And it's kind of true.
Yeah.
But the mind of its own for us is the city of Olympia. And it's really cool that every action is for us, and our staff have been so accommodating to council over the years, and we come up with a wild hair and something we want changed rapidly, always, everything always has to happen fast, right? And it never does, but that's always the wish, right? And sometimes we get cranky or aggravated because
What?
we want something, right? Not me, but other people. Right. And sometimes we're really hard on you all. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everyone, because we can't succeed without having experts in their field around every corner to know the things that we think we know that we don't really. My first day, I thought I knew everything. My second day, I knew nothing. And thanks to city staff, I've been able to be successful.
Well, on behalf of all of us, Jim, just thank you for that, right? And you've been great with staff. Our entire council, as long as I've been here, one of the things that I think is really great about this community and this group of elected officials is how great you are with staff, all of you. We don't have conflicts between elected officials and staff because we're all trying to do the same thing and trying to do the same work and trying to help people and trying to make sure we get things accomplished. And we do that better when we're all working together than we're all in conflict. So I appreciate that, but it takes hard work on both sides, both staff, and it takes hard work on the council side. It takes hard work on your side to get there.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time and your service to this community. I mentioned at the top that I took over as assistant city manager in 2009, so right before your term started. So I've been with you in the executive office the whole time, all the way through. And one of the things I want the community to know is, and Stacey mentioned it and you've talked about it, is you've put your heart and soul into this job for 15 years. You've given this community everything you could, every bit of you, every ounce of you, every bit of energy. And it's been a privilege to watch you work and to work alongside you and to be a partner in the work that you do. So just on behalf of all of us, thank you, Jim, for being willing to be a council member and going on this crazy journey. But it's been pretty fulfilling and it's been pretty rewarding to sit on my side of things and watch everything that you've done.
Yeah. Thank you both. I really appreciate that. It's been a great conversation. I was thinking about the title of this show because you had a draft in the write-up, and thinking about my dad, and I just wanted to close with a quick quote, which is the title of the final episode of MASH, which is "Goodbye, farewell, amen." But I'm not going anywhere, and I'll be here to continue to serve. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for spending time with us, and thank you, Stacey. And so, Stacey, take us home.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for listening. You can find us everywhere you get podcasts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We have our video version at olytv3.com. Download the Oly TV app. It's really good. And I think, Jay, we're going to come back next month to talk about our city budget. And we'll have our assistant city manager, Debbie Sullivan, with us to talk about priority-based budgeting as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah. So if anyone has questions they want to send us, please do. And don't forget to visit our website and subscribe to our e-news and get all the good city information you need. And follow us on our social media at City of Olympia.
Thanks, Stacey, and that's a wrap.